Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts. I'm so excited to be here with David and Micah Gamboa. It's such a privilege to get to finally meet you guys kind of face to face here. And we have, I know, a lot of mutual friends, and I've just loved the work that y'all are doing at Elijah Rising and been kind of like aware of the work that you're doing probably since early on, like 2012. Was that around the time that it got started? Yeah. So excited to get to chat with you guys today, just to give our listeners a little backdrop. So Micah Gamboa is the executive director at Elijah Rising. And then David, her husband, is the communications director. They are doing just incredible work in the kind of realm of helping to end human trafficking and sex trafficking, specifically in the Houston area, kind of that like Gulf Coast region in Texas. So thank you guys so much for being here today.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Yes. Excited to hear more about y'all's journey and your story and how you ended up where you are now. And then also hearing more about the work of Elijah Rising and how people can be praying and supporting and just get involved with that. So maybe we could take a moment and I can let each of you, I know I introed you a little bit, but maybe share a little bit more about who you are and any specifics you want to give about your role and what you do at Elijah Rising, and then we can jump into kind of your journey to this point. So I'm going to start us off, David.
Yeah, I guess Mike is looking at me. Yeah, so I serve as a communications director at Elijah Rising. So we're a nonprofit. We're also a ministry. We were founded as a prayer meeting, and prayer has always been a huge integral part of what we do. So I stay very involved with not just marketing, but also facilitating prayer meetings, worship nights, working with volunteers who actually go and do outreach. And we do outreach every week, every Friday night.
That's awesome.
We send teams to go out and reach people. And so, yeah, I've been with Elijah Rising for, I think, 7 years now.
That's awesome. And
it's been very fun to get to work with people that are very passionate about seeing justice in our city, people that are passionate about the Lord. We've seen God do so many incredible things that are beyond, I guess, what we could have imagined back then when Elijah Rising was just kind of this small fledgling group of people.
Right.
We've seen God move in just incredible ways. And so that's been one of my favorite parts about journeying through this process.
Yeah, so good. How about you, Micah?
So I had the privilege of stepping into Elijah Rising early on, and started as a volunteer, then became operations director. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, stepped into the ED role when our founder transitioned out. So I've had the privilege of walking with this organization from almost inception through today, and so we have grown immensely. I feel like we've matured immensely and grown immensely, and just been able to witness just tremendous things that the Lord has accomplished. So with my executive director role, I get to kind of see like a bird's eye view of everything and how the parts work together. So we have a bunch of different kind of ministry arms that we're kind of doing concurrently, but I love to see, how those arms work together and making the whole, like, the facets of the organization. So it's pretty cool. It's a great job. It's challenging, but it's also fun.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very rewarding, just the work that you're getting to do. And like you were saying, David, too, just the transformation and lives change that, you're getting to witness day in and day out, which is so exciting, and seeing the work that God is doing. So I'm curious if you want to share a little bit more about kind of your background and what brought you to Elijah Rising in the first place.
So I did jewelry design. I worked at administrative jobs, and I had like a small business on the side. So I kind of dabbled in a bunch of different things, but I do see how like my background and all those random pieces kind of helped me get to where I am now.
Yeah.
Just being able to be operations for 7 years in the organization, getting to see that behind the scenes and the nuts and bolts. I feel like really prepared me for this position that I'm doing now, the directorship. And so, yeah, people think you have to be a social worker or have some kind of specific, degree, but that is absolutely not true. The Lord can put you in these kind of roles and placements and just use the skills that you have.
Yeah, that's super encouraging for sure. Yeah, it does seem like you'd probably have to be specialized and have, some specific trainings and things like that. But it's really cool to see how he can use anyone, and also just that willingness, that willing heart to be open, to whatever he has. So How about you, David?
Well, for me, I was on staff at Sugarland Family Church for a long time.
Yeah, that's also another connection that we all have.
Pastor David and Michael and Brianna.
Uh-huh.
While I was there, I began to go back to school. I went to college, and then I was just exposed. I lived in, I guess, kind of this Christian bubble for since the time I was saved, around 13 or 14 years old. I lived in this just Christian bubble, and when I went to U of H, I just began to see just how the world was with people that don't know the Lord. And through that, I encountered Elijah Rising, and I went on the outreach, and I just remember seeing these young girls being sold. It was kind of like a bar, like a pool hall. And I just remember this girl, she was sitting in the corner, and I could just see she was just, you could just tell she was just depressed, and there was just like no life behind her eyes. I mean, she looked like she didn't want to be there at all. And as I got to meet the people, I began doing outreach with Elijah Rising. And as I began to talk to them, I began to understand the reality of trafficking. And it's one of those things that it's like, you can hear about it or you can watch a movie about it, and then it can kind of bring awareness to you, and you can kind of say, okay, that's something I need to give to. But when you see it firsthand, it's kind of like, I can't just keep ignoring it. I can't go on from this. And that was kind of one of the things that stuck with me, was like, I have to figure out, how to address this issue, and not just a way that's like, I just want to bring awareness to it, but there has to be a group of people that will be willing to do the actions that are required to help bring justice, to help introduce people to the Lord. And so that was really what catalyzed me to get involved in anti-human trafficking. I never planned, that wasn't my plan. Like, my degree is in English. I was very skilled in graphic design and video production type stuff, and that was a lot of work that I did. But now that I'm involved in this ministry, I know all those things point to a bigger picture. And so now kind of my vision is, how can we bring the love of the Lord to our city, to these places where it is really so dark. It is a reality that today, right now, there are human beings being sold in our communities, where we live, where we send our kids to school. In some cases, right down the street, someone is being sold. And that was just a reality I couldn't walk away from.
Wow. Yeah. So powerful, and just like, I'm sure emotional in a lot of ways. And thank you guys both for sharing kind of how you ended up in this place. And did you guys meet through Elijah Rising?
We did. Yeah.
Oh,
I was a volunteer.
Okay, awesome. That's so cool.
You should volunteer at your favorite organization, because you might meet your wife.
Exactly. There you go. Yep. I think that is so true, though, when you're just kind of, you are pursuing the Lord, and also, doing ministry and kind of getting in those places, that sometimes is the best place to meet people that have a similar passion and heart. And so that's really fun. I love that. So Micah, you might be able to speak to this as far as being there from, the early days of Elijah Rising. You kind of mentioned that it started as a prayer gathering. So do you want to just go a little more into the early days and kind of how it became a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, for sure. So we started as a prayer meeting, and it was just kind of a ragtag group of people, And so we actually started in the boardroom of a crisis pregnancy center. They let us pray in there at odd times of the day that they weren't in it. So we started there, and then I think we did like once a month, 4-hour prayer meeting or something, and 10, 20 people would come. And then our founder she really felt like the Lord told her to do with like what we call like a night watch. So from 10 to midnight, they would pray. And that moved locations into like I think we were on U of H actually campus.
Oh, cool.
But at any rate, we did this prayer meeting at 10 p.m. on a Friday night every week. And no one comes to prayer meetings, number one. And then for people to come to a 10 p.m. prayer meeting is pretty
right.
But we kept growing. And I don't know. It was just the sovereignty of the Lord. We would have 40 to 60 people at any given time at these prayer meetings. And that's really where it started to take shape. That's when I jumped in and I said, you know what, I can help. I started leading prayer meetings and I started doing their very loosely called newsletter, let me help you. But it was really from that seedbed of prayer that people were inspired to action. And so the prayer meetings, we went to just like driving people around the city, and that birthed what we now have as the awareness van tours. And we've taken tens of thousands of people out on those van tours across the city over the decade. And they've been one of the most impactful, I guess, ministries or programs that we have. It's so unique because you can jump in the van, you're safe in the van, but you also get to hear all the stories of what is happening behind closed doors and the truth behind pornography and sex trafficking and those illicit massage parlors you see everywhere. So it becomes less of like, oh, this is us versus them, and more integrated into your community. And you realize, oh my gosh, that's right around the corner from my life. And I now have a responsibility. Anyways, so we did prayer that rolled into awareness, and then awareness rolled into kind of a natural progression of doing outreach. So we started to add on these things. We would still have the prayer meetings, and then we would do outreaches from like midnight to 3 a.m. or something like that once a week. Started going into these places. We had no idea what we were doing. We would do stuff that I look back now and I'm like, oh gosh, Lord, thank you. Not super dangerous, but just like we didn't know. We had lots of zeal and had a lot of wisdom, but they were also very effective. So we still do a lot of the outreaches similarly. We go out onto the streets, into hotel rooms, go online, we'll go into these brothels, strip clubs, cantinas, and just meet these women where they're at, because a lot of times they don't get to talk to anybody else. They know like their trafficker and they know the men who are buying them. And there's not a whole lot of interaction with the outside world. So we get to have that interaction, bringing the love of Jesus, bringing just like a kind word. Jesus was like, just give a cup of cold water, like just drink of cold water. And like, it's just a moment in time, might be 5 minutes or 15 minutes that we have with her, but it might be the only encouraging word that she's had for months, And so I can't tell you how many of these times where we've encountered a woman and she goes, man, I was just crying out to the Lord today that like, if he was real or if he loved me, that he would send somebody. Wow. So we've had so many of those stories. Wow. So we do that kind of rolled in, just like prayer just kept birthing these actions. We were doing outreaches. We were very zealous. We would have women, like there were no resources when we started really. So we would have women sleeping on our couch and coming to our home and just like, hey, we'll figure it out, what do we do? And little by little, resources started kind of coming to the surface. And then we were able to kind of build like a daisy chain of a pipeline of care, if you will, a continuum of
awesome.
Care. And so it didn't have to all fall in Elijah Rising. There are other agencies and other ministries now like surfacing. And so we can kind of like link arms and say, okay, we can share the load of this. And we're still doing that to this day, still praying for other pieces to rise up as the needs come. But after we did a number of years of outreach, we really felt the need for additional residential care, like more beds. We needed more services. We found that, it's not just women exiting the life or stopping trafficking or stopping prostitution. They needed healthcare. They needed education. They needed childcare, obviously housing, right. Sobriety support. Like there were so many needs that these women had, legal counsel, on and on and on. And so in 2015, we were able to purchase a large campus and we started doing restoration out there. Again, not really knowing what we were doing, but we went for it.
Yes, I love it.
But, you live and learn, and you learn along the way, and you improve right? You say, okay, that didn't work. We're going to do it this way. And we've done that through everything that we've done. We continue to learn and grow and improve. So today we do prayer still, awareness. We have a podcast as well that people can come get educated about trafficking, all different facets. Still do the outreaches. We're constantly trying to improve and expand those. And we've been able to launch outreach in different cities across the nation as well. And then, of course, the restoration home.
It's incredible. I love just the mission that you guys have and linking arms and partnering with other organizations to help bring healing, bring hope, bring light into these different situations. And like you said, I mean, these are people and these are our neighbors. These are people that are in our community, and being able to come alongside and, like you said, the cup of cold water, or just like that sense of refreshment and hope. And like, you're not alone. I think that's so beautiful. So cool. So I'm curious, for you guys being in leadership roles in this ministry, in this space, I imagine, like we talked about, that it's really hard and, in moments, and like it's a lot of heaviness and some of the things you're observing or working through, walking through with these women, and even with, I imagine, some of the men that are in these situations, and I know you've had some really cool podcast interviews, which I definitely encourage people to check out the podcast. But yeah, so sorry, this is a very roundabout question. But basically, I just wanted to hear, what are some of the most maybe challenging aspects of the work that you're doing? And then also maybe some of the most rewarding parts of what you get to do.
One of the most challenging things I've noticed is getting people to understand what trafficking is. Such a complex issue that I feel like, because people don't really understand what it is, they're not able to get behind it wholeheartedly, which is why I think the trafficking problem that we're seeing, it's growing, because it's either because of lack of knowledge or feeling indifferent, or just looking at someone and saying, well, she's a prostitute, like that was her choice. So I don't have any role to play in helping her get out of that or paying any attention. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is that as a society, we have to value people. One example I like to use is people always knew Jeffrey Epstein and the things that he was doing on, the Epstein Island and the airplanes and all of that. That was all information that was made public years and years before he was arrested. But the second that we as a society came together and said, we're not tolerating this, this is wrong, then stuff started happening. It's the same thing with the popular pornography site Pornhub, which was posting videos of children being sexually abused online. And it was just normal. And the second that people said this is a injustice, and as a society, people came together and said no, change started happening. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, is getting the community to feel the responsibility that we have as just good neighbors, to care about the issue of trafficking, and to do our best to learn more about it and learn how we can help, because everyone can give something, whether that's financial, whether that's time, whether that's an outlet of your business or of your ministry through partnership. Everyone has a part to play. So I'll say that's the biggest challenge. And one of the biggest victories is what we're learning about the healing process, what we're learning about helping people overcome trauma. I feel like trauma is a new word.
Yeah, it's kind of a hot topic right now,
a big buzzword.
Buzzword, there we go. Yep.
But we're working with people who've all they've known is trauma ever since, for some, the moment they were born into traumatic incidents, one after the other. And so it's exciting that we're able to see progress, we're able to see healing, reconciliation, forgiveness even, which is huge in our field. But I think that's one of the greatest opportunities that we have right now, is to sort of pioneer this new space where healing can be possible, where it's always been said, you reach a certain point and, there's no healing for you, or you might become a certain age and healing of the trauma becomes way more difficult, and to where it's impossible. And we're just believing that the Lord is going to provide solutions and opportunities and ways for people to overcome that kind of trauma. And what's encouraging to me is that if you could take someone and see them heal of their trauma of something that's so horrendous as human trafficking, imagine what that can mean for the rest of the world who experiences very different traumas, but they're not necessarily at the level of what we see in trafficking.
Right. That's super encouraging in a lot of ways, because it's like, okay, healing is possible, and God, no one is too far gone in a sense, or too far away from like that ability to meet God and to experience that healing. So yeah, it's something that came to mind as you were talking about kind of the challenge of helping people understand, their role to play, or the fact that this is something that everyone should care about in a sense, and is just the fact that I feel like there probably are a lot of misconceptions around trafficking, and there's probably a lot of resources on your website for one, and then also through your podcast. But are there a few just common sort of misconceptions that you guys want to share with us today that might be helpful for people?
Yeah, I think number one, and this probably will surprise some people, but the inextricable link between pornography and trafficking.
Yeah.
So in pornography, you can't determine age, you can't determine consent, even. Both of those are really, really critical. So anytime we've worked with, we've been privy to, and we've heard stories of multiple survivors of pornography that have been forced, defrauded, and coerced into that lifestyle.
Yeah.
So not only that, but we know dozens of accounts, at least, of just minors, he was saying children, or even adults who have had sexual violence perpetrated against them. And then that violence was recorded and then uploaded to a porn site. So you just can't verify, again, age or consent in any of those situations. And so it's not the glamorous lifestyle or even by choice that a lot of people think. And then pornography is a driver of demand. So demand fuels prostitution. Prostitution and trafficking are synonymous terms. We probably don't have time to unpack that completely, but 95% of the people in prostitution have, again, force, fraud, and coercion. Some type of someone who's profiting off of the sale of their bodies. And that's trafficking. So when you see a woman or even a man or whatever on the street and you go, oh, they're just a prostitute. Well, you have to actually peel back the layers of their life and what led them to that situation.
Yeah.
The other thing that shocks people is that they don't realize that trafficking is happening right here in our communities. The number one perpetrator of minor sex trafficking in the United States, of which there are hundreds of thousands in the United States of children who are being trafficked at any given time. The number one perpetrator is a close friend or a family member. And so people think, oh, well, it's international, or it's like, the women in the massage parlors or whatnot. And it feels a little bit us versus them, or like very kind of, separate, but it's really not. There's children in high schools, junior highs, youth groups. It's just crazy, the stories and the accounts that we know of just personally. And so families can really actually play a huge role in this just by teaching body safety, teaching your child internet safety, what to signs to watch out for, grooming, all of that, just being really, really present, not only in your children's lives, but do you have their friends that come over to your house, listening to them, watching for those signs? Are they healthy, happy, whole? Are they, what's going on with them? What's going on with the kids on your street, in your community, your grandchildren, right? So there's a lot that even just healthy parents can do, or churches can make a huge difference in this as well. So we could go on and on, but
yes, maybe we can talk towards the end too about just places people could go to get more education, and if you guys do trainings and things like that for churches or, different groups in the community, that would be awesome to get to hear more. So on kind of the rewarding side of things, I guess, and just seeing the impact that's happening, are there any stories that stand out to you guys that you would want to share, just of transformation that you've seen?
There's so many. Yeah. There's so many.
Which is so cool. Yeah.
I know. It really is so cool. And, one of the, I'll try to share this without sharing any specifics.
That's tough too.
Yeah. No, I know, because we know this person. But one of the first individuals that we were able to serve, well, actually, let me tell this story. This actually was our very first client in our safe home. We used to office out of, so we found this, not found this, but we used to do intervention at this brothel. And we ended up confronting the landowner, and we flipped the brothel and made it our headquarters. Well, there was another brothel a few doors down, still in operation. And we would go in there and do our outreaches and pray for girls or whatever. Well, the owner of that brothel was not very happy that we did that. So she said, please don't ever come again. So we said, okay, we're going to honor that. And we would just pray for them, at our office. Well, 2 years pass, and this woman, it wasn't the owner, it was the kind of the right hand. She comes walking in our office one day in tears. She had a supernatural, a sovereign encounter with Jesus the night before. And she came to us in tears, and she was like, I realize that you guys are not the devil, that you're actually here for us. That you want, you want life for us. You want something better. She had always just been viewing us as the enemy, right? Trying to shut her down or whatever. So she was like, I want out. I don't want to do this anymore. I need a new life. And so she was our first client in our safe home. And she stayed with us for a number of months, not quite a year. She was reunited with her 3 kids. And, it was just a really cool, Lord, look at you. We didn't even have to be present, and you still met her and you revealed yourself to her. I think she had a dream, actually. And so God can just move way beyond our physical limitations and our capacity when we just say, you know what, Lord, you go, let your spirit do the work,
Yes, so. That's incredible. Such a beautiful story. And I know there's so many others that are probably in a similar vein. And yeah, I would love to hear, I know David, you're doing a lot with healing ministry and just having gatherings and things like that. So I thought it'd be fun also to talk about what it looks like to listen to the Lord, to hear the voice of God, thoughts on that. And then also how you guys have maybe seen God at work in healing ministry lately. And it would be awesome. This is a very long question, but to hear, Micah, your testimony. I know you had a pretty intense experience not that long ago, actually, right? I feel like that was within the last few years. So yeah, I don't know where you guys want to start with that.
Yeah, you might want to start with that testimony, because that was kind of the catalyst.
Yes, to kind of the rest of what was happening. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it was interesting. Because we're attending Sugarland Family Church, so we're members there, and I remember the day that Micah, you had a pretty traumatic event, I'll let you share about it, happen on stage. And I remember us praying for you, kind of in the moment that day. And I know it's a pretty amazing story. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share your testimony around healing.
Yeah, we are so grateful to have this story to share. Really, I didn't do anything. When I tell the story, it'll make more sense. So I'm thankful to all the people who were praying for me, because I didn't have capacity to do that. And I know that it made the difference, legitimately. So for those of you who can't see me, I'm in my 30s, pretty healthy, have never had any health issues my whole life. We were doing a presentation. We're speaking at a church. It was the first time speaking at this church too. So new relationship, and we were talking about trafficking and just a very normal kind of Sunday experience. Well, the pastor introduced Elijah Rising, and he was basically guys, the war in the heavenlies is real. There's, I don't know how he worded it exactly, but it's there's angelic powers and there's demonic powers, and we are in the fight, and the fight is here, right in our neighborhoods, and it's a spiritual battle. And Elijah Rising is right on the front lines of this battle. And come on up, And that's how he introduced it, right? It's the context, which is funny in a minute. But so I come up on stage and I essentially just say, thank you so much for having me. My name is Micah Gamboa, and I instantly fall back, and they thought I was having a seizure or passing out or something.
Yeah.
I went to sudden cardiac arrest, which is where your heart just stops, not a heart attack. It just completely stops. All your organs and your breathing and your brain start shutting down, and you die essentially.
Wow.
So that happened.
Yeah, that
happened on stage. Everyone's it's so dramatic. And so they're trying to figure out like what is going on. Like, my poor husband, I think we were married like 10 months at that point, so crazy. Anyway, so yeah, so there were two people in the audience who I found out later were not supposed to be there. They like made a last minute adjustment to like be in the audience, be there that morning for the 9 a.m. One of them was an ER nurse. She had, a doctor. She had worked in the ER for over 20 years. And then another one was a gentleman who had just come back from a tour in Afghanistan. So both kind of medically, crisis response, like very kind of adept at those situations. Mm-hmm. So eventually, I guess they came up on stage and they both did CPR on me for a number of minutes. So he did chest compressions and she did breaths as best she could. It was just a mess. I have to tell this part because so basically whenever I guess I had a cardiac arrest because I wasn't breathing or something, blood started filling up in my lungs. So when he would do chest compressions, there was just like blood spurting everywhere. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's pertinent to the story.
Yeah.
So
she's trying to breathe, but it's like, yeah.
Bless her heart. She's like, God bless you. So they're working on me. And I think at this point, David was like, I have to call like every pastor or like every person I know, because this is a moment of crisis and a moment for faith. I'm like, thank God you just gave my husband like clarity, peace in the moment.
Yeah.
And so it took several minutes for the, EMS to arrive. They did all kinds of stuff on me. And I was flatlined at that point.
Wow.
Got me in the ambulance, took me to the emergency room. He didn't know I'm still flatlined. So he's like, I don't know if she's going to live, dead. I don't know what is happening. The Lord gave us an incredible cardiologist. When we get to the ER, he was in the ER. He's a believer. He is just the most amazing. So he did all kinds of stuff. They realized what was happening. They put me in a coma. So it's like a medically induced coma. You're supposed to decrease your body temp so that you don't have brain damage. And you have to just wait for 3 days. You have to wait and just see what happens.
Yeah.
So I started coming out of it, I guess on day 2. And the doctors were like, this is not good. Like her body temp is too low. And so they kept sedating me. They kept pumping me with like sedation medication. And I kept fighting. Like I kept coming out. And so they're like, well, I don't know what to do. Like there's no protocol for this. So I guess I just stop pumping her full of medications. So people had already warned David, like, she's going to have brain damage. Like, we just don't know how severe it will be. Just prepare yourself that this is not going to be a good situation. So come out of it. I guess the brain doctor, whatever they're called, they came in and they did all the tests of like, hey, do this and do that. And they left like, I've never seen anything like this before. She doesn't have any brain damage whatsoever.
Wow,
like this never happened with cardiac arrest. And so I was able to leave a few days later. And the funny thing about I'll go back to so a few months later, I was able to come back to the church and we did the whole thing over again. And like, I'm okay. Like everything's fine.
And what an amazing testimony coming back too. Yeah. That's cool.
And they were like, yeah, so they've just become our amazing friends. And we have so many people, not just from that church, but hundreds of people were praying for us, like really praying for us. And the funny part was, we're sitting there after the service and this guy comes up and he's like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and shakes my hand. And he's like, oh yeah, I cleaned up the whole mess, like all the blood and everything. I'm a CSI like cleanup guy. And I just had my kid in the car. And I was like, awesome.
That's crazy. Yes.
Anyway, so we are super grateful. That really kind of inspired my husband to start really pursuing the Lord for healing when he saw that. So
yeah, for sure. Wow. So I would be curious to hear your side of it a little bit as well, David, and kind of how that prompted you into this passion.
Yeah. So one of the big revelations I got from just seeing your wife in a coma, you're just sitting in that room and, you're praying. And eventually after several hours or a day goes by, you're kind of like, I've already prayed all the prayers that I know to pray. And so I just remember going to the Lord and just like asking in a very humble way, like, does it even matter if I pray one more time? Is that going to make a difference? And I just felt this like overwhelming yes, like every prayer matters.
Wow.
And seeing my wife come out of that, I had someone come up to me weeks prior and gave me a prophetic word. He was like, God's going to use you to heal people. And I didn't really take it to be that serious.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. God's going to use me, great, whatever, kind of tucked it in the back of my mind.
Right.
And I kind of got word from Pastor Frankie at Celebration Church of the Woodlands that God was healing people in their services. So they were having blind people healed, deaf people healed, and they're having they were showing the videos of the testimonies of people sharing what had happened when they come to service and pray. And so we joined them in just this journey of pursuing the Lord, and it led us to connect with a minister by the name of Dr. Randy Clark, and he leads a huge kind of healing and evangelism ministry. And so we were able to go with him to Brazil. And when I was in Brazil, I was skeptical about healing because I'd never prayed for someone and seen them healed. I'd seen my wife coming out of the coma. I saw that, but I was still a little bit unconvinced. And when I went to Brazil, that was where everything changed. Like one of the most notable miracles that I saw and felt like with my hands was this woman. She had her feet were like flat and it was very painful. And so when we were praying for her, it was like this power just came into her feet. And I got it on video because I was like, this is crazy. But basically her feet were doing these just crazy motions, and you can feel the bones cracking and you can hear them snapping. And by the end of the prayer, the prayer session was probably 45 minutes. She had perfectly formed arches in her feet.
Wow.
And I had never seen anything like I felt it with my hands. And so I came back home and I was like, God, you're the same in Brazil as you are in the United States. And so I had to kind of reconcile why I don't see that on a normative basis. And through that journey, I started doing healing nights at our church and just challenging people, hey, let's believe God. All of the scriptures show Jesus healing the sick. So we just started opening it up to people, and just slowly I began to see, just from me sharing testimonies or just to me inserting the idea in people's minds that God could heal them, it built faith in them, so much so that one of my good friends, he had Lyme's disease and he had to quit his job. He was a physical trainer. He had to move back in with his parents. He had frequent seizures, paralysis, all sorts of symptoms, went to numerous doctors. None of the procedures were helping him. He was on all sorts of medications, all kinds of surgeries to just kind of treat the symptoms. And through me just provoking healing, it led him, and actually did a podcast interview with someone, and he attended. And I began to just pray for him, and no healing happened then. But several years later, he went to Celebration Church of the Woodlands, and the pastor called him out by name, by word of knowledge, and prayed for him. And a couple of weeks later, he was walking, he was running. And now, he was like, now I can think about like what I'm going to do with my life. I hadn't really thought about that before.
Right.
Another cool testimony is I had another friend who, his wife actually went into cardiac arrest because of adrenal fatigue. And he called me. It's like, David, I heard, about your wife's testimony. Would you just be praying? And so I said, you know what, let me meet you at the hospital. And so I go to the hospital, I drive down, I somehow get grouped into the family meeting in the back where the doctor's coming out to basically tell the family, like, this is not a good situation. Basically, her heart was about to give out, and there was not enough strength for the heart to continue pumping. So they were going to put her on life support. And so I just remember I felt the unbelief. I felt like, man, God, this is, I know you did it in my wife, but I'm still at that place of, I want to say you're going to heal her, Lord, but I'm just not 100% sure. But I just began to tell them, hey, it's possible. God can. And yes, the doctor is saying this, but let's believe that God can do the miraculous and do the impossible. And so they prayed, and my friend he's a big person of faith. And so in a matter of weeks, she was able to recover, and now she's back home, and she actually was released from the hospital on her birthday. And so yeah, it's just been really cool journey of just taking simple faith. Like all we do is just pray with people. And one of the biggest game changers, I would say, in praying for the sick and seeing them healed is praying more than once. I'd always ever just, prayed for someone, and if nothing happened, well, let's pray for the doctors, or let's pray that, you'd be able to deal with your sickness.
Right.
And a lot of the times, especially in like a healing meeting or a prayer session, we'll pray multiple times, and it's not till the fifth, sixth, or seventh time that we pray that the healing comes.
Wow.
Or even asking someone to test it out. Like they can't walk, asking them, hey, can you try to walk? Can you try to do something you couldn't do before? Or if you're in pain, can you try to agitate the pain? A lot of times when they take that step of testing something out or trying it out, the healing actually comes right then and there. And I never knew that was supposed to be normative,
right,
in a believer's life, but it's inspired faith, especially for Elijah Rising. One of the main things about Micah's condition that the doctors told me is, the brain, we can't heal the brain. And so a lot of the women that we serve have suffered traumatic brain injuries, PTSD issues, mental illnesses. And a lot of those things you just write off as, you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. You'll be disabled for the rest of your life. And so we're really believing that we're going to be able to see God heal things that maybe we thought were impossible. We know he's a big God, but I think it's just through this journey, I just learned the power of faith, and the realization is that God is the one that gives us the faith. And so if we will seek him for the gift of faith, for the grace of faith, we'll begin to see those things happen. But if it's in our mind that it's not possible, that you shouldn't try, we're not going to see healing happen. And so it's risky. It's a little scary. I never saw myself in healing ministry, but being in it, the fruit has been very rewarding, just to see people. And it's been a great way to just share the gospel with people that don't know the Lord. When you get a personal encounter with the Lord, it's hard to say no to.
Right. Yes. So good. So true. So Micah, for you coming kind of on this side of coming through that experience and experiencing healing, and, how has that shifted things for you? If I'm assuming they have, but how has that shifted your perspective, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's been a journey of integration of, I guess what I mean by that is it's very easy for me, I know for many of us, to just compartmentalize things and say, oh, this is Elijah Rising over here. This is an anti-trafficking ministry, and I need to run it like a business and a ministry and all these things and be excellent. And this over here is my personal life. And this is where I can pursue the Lord for signs, wonders, miracles. But to see the Lord and I think mainly through the working that David has been doing to integrate those worlds, organization as a whole, and say, no, we are whole people. We are the same people here as we are here. And we can see not only excellence and, we follow best practices and all that stuff in our work, but also ask the Lord for the power of the Spirit, the wisdom of the Lord in these kind of situations. So just to see those things kind of merging together has been really, really beneficial. And then, it's a journey. I think sometimes it's easy to believe for other people. It's harder to believe for yourself. So we've had a number of situations where we just had to be challenged just personally, say, okay, but do we God did it back then, but will he do it again for me? Or am I asked if I need healing again? Right. or how long is he all those questions and so it really does challenge you, your identity in Christ. It challenges your relationship with the Lord. What am I believing you for? Am I truly believing your word? Or am I believing a construct of my own, something that I made myself or my culture has dictated to me. So it's a little ambiguous, but
yeah, kind of sifting through those things and
sifting through and just really like being challenged. I think being challenged to not just identify with what's easy, and sometimes it's a little lazy and a little easy to be like, oh, I don't know if God really wants to do that, because it's uncomfortable and it's scary to say like, no, he does want to heal me. He does want to heal this person. He does want to show up for you. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but
for sure. Yes. Yeah. Taking that. It's true. It is like a step outside of our comfort zone and that risk, like you guys are saying. So yeah, well, this has been seriously such a gift just to get to hear y'all's testimony together. And then also the work that is happening currently right now. As we wrap up, something that I like to ask everyone that comes on the show is there kind of just like a word of encouragement or something on your heart that you'd like to share with our listeners? And majority of our listeners are probably in kind of the creative space, dancers, musicians, writers, visual artists, but we do have a range. So anything that you feel like you want to share would be incredible.
Yeah, I would say don't let any fear stop you from doing what you feel like you're called to do, because there's always going to be critics. There's always going to be these negative voices that say you're stupid for believing that, or not worth your time pursuing this. But, I think especially even as creatives, we can just be available for the Holy Spirit to use us however he wants. And I find that when we limit him, it makes it way harder on us. But just be available and be open to the Holy Spirit using you in ways that you wouldn't imagine. Because there's the verse that says he's able to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we can ask, think, or imagine, but it's according to the power that's within us. So it's according to our agreement with what God can do through us. And so I would just encourage you guys to lay down fear today and just be available to do the thing that the Holy Spirit's putting in front of you.
So good. How about you, Micah?
I jumped into this work because I saw a documentary, and that documentary was the first documentary that somebody made, the producer made. And it has so impacted so many people's lives and driven them into action, specifically around sex trafficking. Right. So I just remember that whenever you said creatives, he probably didn't know if it was going to be a success, or like didn't know what he was doing, or had so many doubts, I'm sure. He was in ministry before. Like, how did that to make that leap? Right. So I want to encourage people to, take that leap. We all have a message inside of us. We all have deposits of what the Lord has done. Whether you think it's macro or micro, I can assure you that the Lord has been faithful and has taught you things, and you have something of value to share with others. So, asking the Lord, where do I deposit this? Like what's the medium? And maybe I have multiple mediums and streams of ways that I disseminate this information, but people need to hear what you have to say.
So good. So good. Well, last fun question is, what is one of your favorite things right now? Which can literally be anything.
Oh, mine is fishing. I have a new kayak, so that's
brand new kayak.
Love it. It's probably fun getting outside too.
Yeah. I am gardening a lot. So we have a huge garden in our backyard, and I'm kind of obsessively diving into that world.
I love it.
Like every little square inch is, how can I make this into a plant? I don't know. Figuring it out.
That's so fun. I love it. Well, this has been incredible. And like I mentioned, I would love to let people know where they can contact you guys and connect in and just learn more about how they can get involved either here or also just in their area.
Yeah. So 2 ways, one through ElijahRising.org, and that has our podcast information, or you can go on Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, really. It's just the Elijah Rising podcast. So any of those ways. And then David has his own website about like the healing ministries and the whole story, the blog posts and all that stuff about our healing journey.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's davidgamboa.org.
Awesome. And
we actually just did our first seminar on healing on Saturday. So hopefully we'll be able to do some more in the future. So if you subscribe to that, you'll get all the info for that.
Perfect. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes to both of those. And thank you guys so much again for sharing your story, for being willing to take the time today. And this has been truly just such a gift. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank
you, Rachel.
Appreciate you.
You can find all the links, full show notes, and additional resources on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com. If you're interested in supporting the show, some great ways to do that are to share it with a friend, to rate and review wherever you're listening. And then also, if you're interested in giving financially, you can check out our Patreon community, where you get bonus content each month and have a special part in helping make this podcast possible. You can access our Patreon community on the link at our website or by going to creativeimpactpodcast.com/PATREON. Thank you all so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. Until next time, remember that you were designed to create. You were made to inspire. Continue living with purpose and making an impact. I'll see you next time, friends.